Hey Reddit, buckle up, because this story is the kind that starts small and just snowballs until you are left wondering how a family can possibly take something so simple and turn it into a mess. I am a 27-year-old woman named Emily, and if you have ever been the responsible kid in your family, you are probably going to feel every ounce of this. For context, my fiance's name is Daniel. He is 29, and he is the first person in my life who ever made me feel like I was enough without having to perform for affection. With him, I never felt like I had to scrub a bathroom until my knuckles bled or rearrange myself into whatever version of perfect daughter my parents wanted that week. He has this grounded sense of humor that makes me laugh when I least expect it, and he is steady in the way that anchors you when your world feels chaotic. We dated for 3 years, and when he proposed last fall, I felt like I was finally being chosen for once instead of being the one holding everything together. But if you want to understand why all of this matters, you need to know a little about my family. My younger brother, Ryan, is 16. He is the golden child, the baby of the family, the one my parents put on a pedestal like he is some kind of prodigy. Growing up, if Ryan wanted the newest iPhone, he had it by the end of the week. When I asked for $20 for gas, I would get a lecture about responsibility and independence. At 18, my parents decided it was time I learned the real world, and they charged me rent to live at home even though I was working 2 jobs and taking community college classes. Ryan? He has never once been asked to contribute anything. Taking out the trash is treated like he just earned a Nobel Prize. My mom, her name is Karen, and yes, the irony is painful, believes Ryan is destined for greatness because he is so charismatic. In reality, his most significant accomplishment is reaching level 300 in Fortnite. My dad, Steve, is the type who rolls his eyes at feelings and thinks sarcasm is the same thing as wisdom. His favorite phrase whenever I tried to express myself growing up was, "Don't be dramatic." Meanwhile, I was the one who kept the gears turning. When my mom had knee surgery, I drove 2 hours to stay with her, prepped meals, and set alarms for her medication schedule. When my dad's car broke down, I lent him my Corolla for 3 months. I covered their utility bills more than once while still juggling my own student loans and rent. And Ryan? Not once has he lifted a finger for them. Fast forward to Daniel proposing. We started planning a fall wedding at a vineyard just outside Nashville. Nothing gaudy, but beautiful fairy lights, about 120 guests, good food, an open bar, the kind of thing that feels like a dream without being over the top. Daniel's family, the Andersons, are the kind of big, loud Italian-Irish family you see in movies. Every holiday feels like a championship game, complete with way too much food, endless laughter, and people breaking into song at random. His mom, Maria, basically adopted me years ago. She said she wanted me to shine and even offered to cover the cost of my wedding dress. His cousins? They are the type who would start a conga line at a funeral. My parents, on the other hand, never once asked how they could help. Not once. No talk of pitching in, no excitement, no energy. Just silence. When Daniel put the ring on my finger, I could not wait to call them. I was shaking, crying, and smiling all at once. I dialed my mom first, blurting out, "Mom, Dad, I'm getting married. The wedding's this fall, and I'd love for you to be there." There was silence on the line for what felt like a lifetime. Then my mom finally said, "Oh, honey, that's really inconvenient timing. Can't you move it? We already have plans." At first, I thought she meant something serious, like a surgery or a once-in-a-lifetime trip. No, it was a couple's retreat in Florida they had booked with church friends. My dad chimed in with his usual dismissive tone, saying, "Don't be so dramatic. Weddings are overrated anyway. Just celebrate later." And then, from the background, Ryan yelled, "I'm not coming either. I've got a party that night." A party. Chips, soda, and Fortnite. Apparently, that was more important than his sister's wedding. I did not scream. I did not cry. Something inside me just cracked and came out as laughter. Real, manic laughter, because what else can you do when your own family treats your wedding like you invited them to watch you change a flat tire? I finally said, "Okay, no worries," and I hung up. Here is where the shift happened. Daniel's family doubled down. They told me that if my parents would not show up, they would love me twice as hard. And they meant it. On the wedding day, they showed up with all the warmth and energy my own family never gave me. His mom cried so hard during the vows that she had to go redo her mascara in the bathroom. His cousins turned the dance floor into something resembling the Olympics. The open bar became a battleground of who could outdance Uncle Tony, who at one point slid across the floor on his knees like a rock star. The photographer captured it all, fairy lights twinkling, me and Daniel laughing like the world did not exist beyond that vineyard, moments so beautiful they looked like they belonged in a magazine. At the end of the night, under the lights, Daniel kissed me like the rest of the world had disappeared. I uploaded one picture to Instagram, me and my husband laughing under the fairy lights with the caption, "Best day ever." Within hours, my phone started buzzing nonstop. My mom texted, "Wait, you had the wedding without us?" My dad wrote, "You didn't even give us another chance to reschedule." And Ryan messaged me, "Wow, guess I'll never forgive you for this." I could not resist. I typed back 3 little words, "Don't be dramatic." The irony was so sweet it could have given me diabetes. But that's not the end. About a week after the wedding, Daniel and I were in Maui, sitting on the balcony of our little Airbnb that overlooked the ocean. I was still glowing from everything sun, sand, the kind of happiness that seeps into your bones when you realize you married someone who actually chooses you every single day. Daniel kept sneaking me macadamia nut chocolates like I was a kid at Halloween, and I kept pretending to be surprised every time I found one on my pillow. It felt like winning the lottery, and for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the invisible weight of being the designated responsible one in my family. Then my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, because nothing ruins a pina colada buzz like a text from home. But then the voicemail preview flashed across my screen, and I knew instantly what I was in for. The clipped, overly formal tone, the kind she used whenever she had clearly rehearsed the entire speech in the bathroom mirror before dialing. I pressed play. My mom's voice exploded out of the speaker like she was auditioning for a soap opera. She said she was heartbroken, just shattered, that I had been so selfish not to postpone my wedding for them. She went on about how hurt they were, how inconsiderate I had been, and then, like a plot twist even a bad sitcom wouldn't dare, she claimed they would now require reimbursement for the deposit they would have given us if I had only included them. I actually choked on my drink. Pina colada everywhere. Daniel nearly spit his beer across the railing. A deposit? This woman hadn't offered me so much as a Target gift card, let alone thousands of dollars. She was the same person who once sat me down and told me weddings were a waste of money and that I should just run down to City Hall because, in her words, romance was temporary, but rent was forever. And now she was reinventing herself as some kind of secret benefactor, demanding reimbursement for imaginary funds? Curiosity got the better of me. I called her back, partly to see how far she was willing to take this fantasy. She answered on the first ring, like she had been pacing with the phone in her hand, waiting for me to fold. I asked her directly if she was seriously asking me to reimburse her for a check she had never actually given me. She launched into an Oscar-worthy performance about how they had set money aside, how I had pushed them away, how I had robbed them of the chance to help. When I asked her how much, there was this long, heavy pause before she landed on $5,000. I almost laughed out loud. These were the same people who once called me at midnight begging for $80 because their electricity was about to be cut off. Suddenly they had been sitting on $5,000. Daniel, always the quiet genius, leaned over and whispered that I should ask for the receipt. So I told her that if she could send me a copy of the check stub, I would make sure the reimbursement department processed it right away. She stuttered, went silent, and then muttered that this wasn't the point. Oh, but it was the point. The whole thing was a guilt trip dressed up as financial concern. Meanwhile, I was sipping pineapple juice on a balcony, watching her unravel over Monopoly money. That night, she took her performance to Facebook. She posted a passive-aggressive status that said something like, "Some people forget who raised them when they find new families." My Aunt Deb, bless that woman, swooped into the comments section like a superhero and wrote, "Honey, families show up." You didn't. I nearly sent her a fruit basket right then and there. By the time we came home from the honeymoon, the imaginary deposit had vanished from the conversation. She never mentioned it again, which told me everything I needed to know. But of course, the vacuum needed to be filled, so she came up with a new narrative. Now she claimed I had robbed her of her mother of the bride moment. It was as though she wanted to rewrite history and cast herself as the victim of my cold, ungrateful daughter act. Every time she brought it up, I thought about Daniel's mom, Maria, who was still sending me pictures of my dress and telling me she couldn't stop crying because I looked perfect. The whiplash between those two women could have given me whiplash and a neck brace. And just when I thought things couldn't get messier, Thanksgiving rolled around. 2 months after the wedding, I made the mistake of convincing myself that it was time to be the mature one. Against my better judgment, I decided to show up at my parents' house for Thanksgiving. Part of me wanted to prove that I wasn't the one who had cut ties, that I was still willing to extend the olive branch. Part of me, if I'm being honest, just really wanted mashed potatoes with too much butter. Daniel, ever the voice of reason, looked at me before I left and said it was like walking into a minefield with a fork in my hand. He wasn't wrong. I baked a pumpkin pie from scratch, homemade crust, golden to perfection, the kind of pie Martha Stewart herself would have nodded approvingly at. I wanted to walk in with something that screamed effort, contribution, a peace offering. The second I stepped through the door, though, my mom plastered on a smile that looked more like she had just swallowed a lemon and was trying to convince herself it was champagne. Her first words weren't "Happy Thanksgiving" or "I'm glad you're here." They were, "Oh, you came." Like I was an unexpected cameo in a sitcom, and she was waiting for the laugh track. The table was set with all the classics: turkey, stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, the works. On the surface, it looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. In reality, it felt more like the opening credits of a true crime documentary. The tension was thick enough to slice with the carving knife. Everyone was hyper-aware of the elephant in the room, but no one wanted to be the first to poke it. It took less than 5 minutes for Ryan to light the match. My teenage brother leaned back in his chair with a smirk plastered on his face, clearly proud of himself for what he was about to say. He announced to the whole room that I had abandoned my family on the most important day of my life. He said it like a news anchor delivering breaking headlines, waiting for his dramatic mic drop moment. The room fell silent except for Uncle Rick, who coughed into his beer like he wished it was whiskey instead. I looked Ryan dead in the eye and told him that no, I hadn't abandoned my family, they had abandoned me. The air shifted immediately. My mom gasped like I had physically slapped her. My dad didn't even flinch. He kept carving the turkey like he was in his own little world, muttering his favorite line, the one I'd been hearing since I was a teenager: "Don't be dramatic." That was it. The straw, the camel, the broken back. I stood up so fast that my chair screeched across the hardwood floor, making everyone freeze. I said that if I had to hear that phrase one more time, I was going to tattoo it across my forehead just to save everyone the trouble of repeating themselves. Aunt Linda dropped her fork mid-bite. Cousin Megan nearly choked on her cranberry sauce. Ryan muttered something about me always being extra, and I snapped right back, reminding him that this was coming from the same kid who had skipped my wedding for Doritos and Fortnite. His face turned redder than the cranberry sauce, and he hissed that the party had been important. The words hung in the air, ridiculous and infuriating all at once. My dad sighed like he was the long-suffering victim in all of this. My mom fanned herself as if she was seconds from fainting, clutching her pearls that didn't even exist. The green bean casserole sat there steaming, untouched, a sad metaphor for the whole evening. At that moment, I decided I wasn't sticking around to play the villain in their imaginary play. I grabbed my pie, because no way was I leaving behind hours of my labor, and I walked straight out the door without a backward glance. By the time I pulled into Daniel's parents' driveway, the difference between families couldn't have been clearer. Maria was already waiting at the door with a plate piled high: turkey, mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, enough food to feed me for a week. She hugged me so tightly I thought I might break, shoved the plate into my hands, and told me I didn't need drama, I needed gravy. I laughed until my eyes stung, and when I took my first bite of that turkey, perfectly seasoned and carved with actual love, it hit me, this was what family was supposed to feel like. I thought that would be the end of it, that the Thanksgiving meltdown would fade into the family's long list of things we never speak about but never forget. For a while, it was quiet. I got used to the silence, used to the absence of texts or calls. I leaned into the warmth of Daniel's family, who showed up for birthdays, dinners, and random Tuesday nights just because. I started to believe that I could finally move forward without looking back. And just when I thought the Thanksgiving meltdown would be the end of it, 6 months later my phone buzzed with a new message. Guess who it was? None other than Golden Boy Ryan, with his biggest request yet. 6 months after the Thanksgiving fiasco, life had finally reached a kind of peace I didn't know I needed. Daniel and I were settling into married life in the best way possible: slow mornings where we didn't rush anywhere, lazy Sundays spent binge-watching cooking shows and failing miserably at recreating them, planning weekend trips just because we could, and laughing at the fact that his mom still called me every other day just to check in on her daughter. It was the kind of life that felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. My parents had gone mostly radio silent, which I can only describe as a spa retreat for my soul. No guilt-tripping voicemails, no manipulative texts, no unsolicited drama. For the first time, I got to exist without being told I was ungrateful for not sacrificing myself for the family circus. Daniel and I joked that the silence was proof that miracles do exist. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It wasn't a scammer. It wasn't spam. It was Ryan. The message was simple, abrupt, and very on brand. Can you co-sign on a car for me? Ryan. No greeting, no context, no hello. Just straight into, give me money. I stared at the screen for a full minute before showing Daniel. He laughed so hard he actually snorted coffee out of his nose and said my brother thought I was the Bank of America with a side of emotional labor. I texted Ryan back, asking why he needed a car. His response was immediate, because Mom and Dad told him I was more responsible with credit and he deserved reliable transportation. Deserved. Like it was his birthright. I asked what kind of car he was looking at, assuming it would be something reasonable, like a used Honda Civic or a Toyota Corolla. No. The boy sent me a link to a brand new Dodge Charger with tinted windows and a price tag of $38,000. I nearly dropped my phone. I wrote back, asking if he seriously expected me to risk my credit so he could cosplay as a fast and furious extra. He replied with nothing but a shrug emoji. A shrug. When I told him no, he doubled down. He wrote that Mom and Dad said I was selfish, that I had good credit and money now, and that I owed it to family. Daniel leaned over, took my phone, and typed the reply himself. Don't be dramatic. Uber exists. Ryan's response was immediate. First, he sent 10 separate wow texts, each one more dramatic than the last. Then came the line I had heard before, I'll never forgive you for this. Then, just like that, he blocked me. It was glorious. It was the best 7 days of peace I had experienced in years. Of course, it didn't last. A week later, he unblocked me, and this time his request wasn't about a car. He wrote, hey, can you help me with my FAFSA? I don't get this stuff, and Mom said you're good at forms. I actually laughed so hard I had to sit down. This was the same kid who had skipped my wedding for chips and Fortnite, and now he wanted me to walk him through government financial aid forms? Spoiler, I didn't help. I didn't even reply. Daniel asked me later if I felt guilty for ignoring him. I told him absolutely not. If Ryan could figure out how to run up a $200 DoorDash bill on Mom's card, then he could figure out FAFSA. Actions have consequences, and if his consequence was navigating financial aid without a personal secretary, so be it. For a while, things were quiet again. No car requests, no FAFSA pleas, no dramatic declarations of betrayal. I thought the storm had finally passed. But I should have known better. Because just when I thought Ryan's begging was the peak of family delusion, the next chapter landed in my lap. This one was less about money and more about pure, deliciously petty revenge. After the whole FAFSA and Dodge Charger fiasco with Ryan, something in me shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking myself to keep the peace. I wasn't scrambling to fix problems that weren't mine, or carrying the emotional weight of my family on my back like some unpaid therapist. Daniel kept hyping me up, reminding me that I didn't owe anyone my credit score, my time, or my sanity. Maybe it was the lingering honeymoon glow, or maybe I was finally just tired of being the family doormat, but I felt bold. And bold Emily had ideas. Daniel's family had quietly been working on a surprise for us, a professional wedding photo album. Not just a cheap printout in a plastic sleeve, but the real deal hardcover, thick glossy pages, a ribbon bookmark, the kind of thing you'd expect to see on display in a bridal magazine. The album was gorgeous. Page after page of captured magic. Me and Daniel laughing under twinkling fairy lights. Maria crying into a napkin during the vows. His cousins turning the dance floor into a full-blown circus. Uncle Tony in his suit, absolutely committed to doing the worm, grinning like he was 20 instead of 50. Every photo radiated joy, warmth, and the kind of love I had been searching for my whole life. Daniel's family didn't just make one copy. They printed a dozen. Grandparents got them, cousins got them, aunts and uncles got them. Everyone was proudly displaying these albums like trophies. When I held mine, I had this idea that was equal parts petty and poetic justice. We mailed one to my parents. On the inside cover, I wrote in perfect, looping cursive, to Mom and Dad, since you couldn't make it, here's a glimpse of what you missed. Love, Emily. Petty? Absolutely. But it was the truth, carved in hardcover and glossy ink. They had chosen not to be there. I wasn't going to rewrite that history for them. About a week later, my phone lit up with Mom's number. I put it on speaker so Daniel could hear. The second I picked up, she went full meltdown. Sobbing, gasping, Every ounce of drama she could muster poured out of her voice. She accused me of being cruel, of rubbing salt in their wounds, of sending something so hurtful it was like I had stabbed her in the heart. I stayed perfectly calm and said, "Well, now you can see what you missed." Daniel had to bury his face in a pillow to muffle his laughter. Mom sputtered, cycled through all 5 stages of grief in under 3 minutes, and finally hung up with a dramatic, "I just can't." 10 minutes later, Aunt Deb texted me a picture of the album proudly displayed on her coffee table with the caption, "It's gorgeous." Their loss. That text was better than dessert. Fast forward 1 year later. Our first anniversary. I was back in Maui with Daniel, sitting on the beach with my toes in the sand, sipping pina coladas with little umbrellas in them. We had recreated our honeymoon almost down to the detail, except this time there was less jet lag and more inside jokes. Daniel's family was blowing up the group chat with throwback photos from the wedding, adding commentary like, "Remember when Tony nearly dislocated his shoulder trying to do the worm, and who knew Uncle Rick could breakdance?" It was chaos, but the good kind. The kind that fills you up instead of draining you. Meanwhile, my parents hadn't moved an inch. They still hadn't forgiven me. Ryan had apparently made it his mission to become the king of vague, passive-aggressive social media. He posted a cryptic Snapchat that said, "Fake sisters always reveal themselves," which was objectively hilarious, since I am his only sister. Who he thought he was subtweeting, no one will ever know. But here's the thing, for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I didn't feel the usual gut punch of guilt or the heavy blanket of obligation. I wasn't their ATM. I wasn't their chauffeur. I wasn't their emotional sponge to wring out whenever they needed relief. I was free. I was loved without conditions or strings attached. Daniel's family treated me like I was gold. His mom still sent me recipes with little notes like, "This is what family dinners should taste like." His cousins invited me into their group chats where the main topics were food, sports, and roasting each other in the most affectionate way possible. Every single interaction with them reminded me that love wasn't supposed to feel like a job interview I kept failing. It was supposed to feel like showing up to a table where your seat was always waiting. So, this is my mic drop moment. To anyone reading who's been conditioned to believe that blood automatically equals loyalty, hear me, it doesn't. Blood doesn't excuse neglect, cruelty, or selfishness. Blood doesn't entitle anyone to your money, your credit score, or your peace. If you've ever felt guilty for choosing yourself, for choosing peace, for choosing joy over chaos, don't. Family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up, who makes space for you, who loves you without conditions or IOUs. I built a family that feels like home, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. Here's to peace, pina coladas, and never co-signing for family cars.